reaction?
Now, I'm just asking ethically, ODI and others, who created those monsters in Afghanistan to dismantle the Soviet Union? It's not us as Muslim churches, it's them. So the politicization and the militarization of aid is, for me, a suicidal. It's a crime against the poor, a crime against the nations, and a crime against humanity. And this is what governments are trying to do now, to militarize and to politicize. Unfortunately, there was a meeting two weeks ago in Brussels, in European Union, where you found people in uniform attending a humanitarian meeting. Why? It's unethical. It's, for me, it is suicidal for the people working in Somalia, for the people working in Afghanistan, for the people working in Yemen, and for the people working in Pakistan. When you militarize the aid and humanize the military to go and deliver this aid in Iraq, so who is going to be killed? It is the people not in the uniform, the people in the civilian dress who are actually delivering the humanitarian aid to the people in Iraq and other areas. So really, if we talk about aid now, you talk about politicization and the militarization of it, and you have to advocate and ask ODI, come with us to stop politicization of aid and militarization of it. It's not about funding from the US or from the European government or whatever it is. Not only that, the tendering for the aid fund is going to private companies, is going to security private companies, then going to the security, then go to the aid agencies. So instead of having the 100% fund by governments and by European Union and others, somebody else is sharing the cake with you. So you are left with reduced budget to maintain your operation in this difficult area. I hope that the ODI report is not only addressing the need of the international Western agencies who have good difficulty to raise funds now from the West because of the financial problem and because they fail to raise funds from the Gulf area. I hope it addresses strongly the need of the individual Muslim donor who has a humanitarian space or humanitarian space has been reduced to nothing.
On this humanitarian situation and the politicization of it in Palestine, you've got in the West Bank where aid from DFID and from other national aid bodies has been given for state building to the Palestinian Authority, which is a euphemism for build up the security services.
Well, that's direct
and
interference in the political process in the name of aid.
And we are not allowed to operate directly in the West Bank. Why? Because Israel says we cannot. So it's an occupied situation. We cannot get in there to do stuff. In Gaza, the siege in Gaza is a political decision by the Israelis and backed by the West to starve the people.
Well, talk about politicization and militarization of aid. We had the flotilla directly attacked.
But is it, even when you're in Gaza,
when they did try to get aid
I've been in
Gaza
3 times this year already, alhamdulillah. And when you're sitting on the seafront, you can see the Israeli gunboats going up and down, stopping the fishermen going out within their own territorial waters, being able to fish. And sometimes they're shot, sometimes their boats are destroyed and so on. But because that's a political decision to stop anything getting in, it has eased slightly, but to stop anything getting into Gaza, charity then becomes a political issue because we are trying to break a politically imposed blockade. And so we're sucked in. We don't want to be involved in politics. We want to be as far away from politics as possible because it's against the nature of charitable giving in humanitarian space. But we're sucked in. So by supporting Palestinians in need, for example, is seen as a very political act. And we're kept at arm's length by our own government, although we're given the clearance in this country and everything. So they could quite easily, I think, do something with America to get us off this list. We're having to do that ourselves at great cost to the charity, financially. And in order to get full access to the banking system, we own 2 of the major banks as taxpayers, and they're the ones. One of them is the one which dropped us when we were put on the list, and the other one is preventing the Islamic Bank of Britain from giving us any clearing facilities. So how are we supposed to collect and distribute the aid? It's a very difficult situation, but it's very political, and we don't want to be there. We want to be out in the humanitarian space, not in the political space. Thank you very much.
Well, if I can just say, this government has actually now made that link even more overt. Before there was this understanding that a lot of international aid was geared towards British interests, but now this government is saying openly that we should be gearing aid towards our national interests. So it's not really about the victims or the people in need. So the fact that it's even more brazen doesn't really give much hope.
I don't agree that aid was geared towards British interests. We introduced, the Labour Party introduced legislation to ensure that aid was targeted towards poverty alleviation, not for any other reason. Now, there's a very clear legislative framework, and as a party in opposition, what we're doing is making sure that the government does not allow other factors to encroach on that legislative duty, such as the militarization of aid, and that. But we all have to be vigilant about that. But also the way in which the private sector is engaged. Now, the private sector can have a legitimate role to play in infrastructure development and so on and so forth, but it cannot be a substitute for humanitarian agencies and the excellent work that organisations like Islamic Relief and others do. The third point I'd make is about about dealing with this point about the perception of Muslim charities. In the post-9/11 context, there's no question of the fact that Muslim charities such as Islamic Relief and many others felt much more they had to prove themselves. And I think we need to make sure that there's a maturity in the way that international donor countries work with Muslim organisations. I know that Islamic Relief works in countries that others find very difficult to operate in. And the fact that they bring a faith dimension in terms of who they are is absolutely powerful, and the links that they have. So we, I think as a community, we need to be focused on ensuring that we challenge governments when they are doing that, but also make sure that the regulations...
How would you advocate the challenge? So
well, I think
our viewers watching this programme, what would be your advice to them?
Having the dialogue with parliamentarians in all the parties, not just in my party, but also their local MPs, to make sure that they're aware of the work that's being done. Also, that we have a duty as Muslims to donate to charity, and that space is created so that our money is properly, channeled, and that actually people don't feel there are lots of barriers, as Dr. Banna has pointed out, to giving money. And this point about charity going underground is a very serious point, which is that we need transparent, effective, reputable organisations, that Muslim organisations that can take the money and give it to important causes. And in the second and third generation, the first generation did it often through their families, which is an effective way of donating, but they found it very challenging. Now, what my generation, the younger generation, are looking for is they're looking for organisations like Islamic Relief to be able to give their money to causes that are here and now and pressing, not just to their families in their country of origin. They do that as well. And we need to make sure that is absolutely central to government thinking. In my party, we're doing a massive national policy review exercise on the field of international development and looking for submissions from people, and especially from the diaspora communities and, of course, the British Muslim community. And I'm leading that with my colleagues. And I think these points are really important, that we ensure that we really understand what's happening and the added value that the British Muslim community provide and other Muslim communities, provide around the world to humanitarian aid. But this is not easy. But we need to, as a community, be very clear what our demands are to this government, just as it happened in the last. But increasingly, we need to make sure in these very challenging climates that our money goes to the people who need it most.
Well, Andrew Mitchell, the Government Minister for International Aid, was invited on the programme, but unfortunately was not able to make it. Dr. Hany, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, I think to add on what she said, we need to create a new momentum by building coalition amongst the Muslim organization and amongst non-Muslim organization. And this is a new philosophical thinking for the maturity of the Muslim charities here in the West. We have to come together. The individual organization cannot do it alone. We created something like Muslim Charities Forum, the Humanitarian Forum, and then we talked about Muslim Media Forum, which has been registered already for the Muslim media. Those coalition has to come out strongly and advocate for a sector. It's not only the diaspora community. Actually, we created another one called Somali Relief and Development Forum. The largest 7 Somali organization in London and Birmingham in the country came together under one platform to tell the Somali community that we are doing it collectively. This new way of thinking of collectiveness or being together It is something which is the Muslim community has to come out, because there's no way that we're going to stop working for helping people. There's no way that will be an end for our humanitarian activity, because we are, as Muslims, have a global duty to save humanity through our faith, and we are going to do it, whether people like it or not, because we have a role. And the international humanitarian field or image or portray cannot be complete without us, because we have the know-how in different areas, and we know how can we do it, and we can complement our role to other roles as well. So a coalition, building forum, building consortium, talking to people is a new philosophical thinking for the young generation, using the social media effectively. The social media in Egypt, the social media in Yemen, in Syria, in Tunisia, in Libya has changed government. We have been there for about 30 and 40 years. The effective use of the social media and the yappy media, as you call it nowadays, actually, where I am at the age of, I'm still younger, at the age of 25, I started to use the yappy media. Actually, I'm getting a lot of fans and telling them my messages. And this is something that the Muslim Charities has to realize, the power of the social media and the power of the media and the power of your program. It's not only about TV, it's about how can you communicate the tweeting message, the Facebook message, the blog message, and all these sorts of things. And Muslim Charity has to be geared of understanding that partnership has to be there, because the tsunami wave of anti-Muslim charity philosophy or atmosphere is there since the Afghan war, not only recently.
We only have, we don't have that long left, so building on this idea, of course being isolated isn't going to help anybody. It's not helping the charities, it's not helping the people who need help. And of course it makes sense that people come together with this. Is that possible for an organisation like yourself, which has been politically isolated, or are you finding that other organisations are weary of having you as part of a
It's very difficult.
coalition?
It's very difficult. There are some who understand the situation, that if it's Interpal today, it could be Islamic Relief, could be Muslim Aid, could be anybody else tomorrow. And so there is a need to be standing together. But it's a case of building confidence. And what Dr Hany mentioned before about the Muslim charities really following the rule book. In our case, we think we've rewritten the rule book, because in terms of due diligence and risk management procedures, policies and procedures, you know, Interpal's, I would put my hand on my heart and say, ours is industry standard, and other people are following us. So anybody who's working in an area of conflict, it's there, and the ability is there, because the rule book is there. We're 110%.
You have to be over and beyond.
We've got to be over and
because of
beyond.
the
We've got to prove ourselves. We're building this confidence so that not only the individual donors can have confidence in us, but other organisations and the governments to say, okay, these are the experts, let them go in, let them do their business, and you know, we can look for the wrongdoing elsewhere. It's the under the table stuff, it's the suitcases full of cash. That's where there is likely to be law breaking and money going astray.
Well, we've run out of time, unfortunately. A very important discussion. Thank you to all our guests, and for our viewers, a message from Rushanara Ali there. Do contact your MP, regardless of their background. And the opposition Labour Party at the moment is undergoing a policy review, so a chance to input there too. Do join us for our second half.